Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are very excited to be here with you today and sharing with you what we think is a very well-timed and appropriate topic. As we all know, there is an impending restrictions on third-party data with the impending restrictions to cookies on some of the big name browsers out there, which is already happening on Safari, but as we know, this will be happening on Chrome as well soon. And so what does this mean for advertising online? So today we have a webinar to discuss exactly that, how we can prepare for a cookieless world and how you can continue to advertise online and specifically with Facebook and leverage new kinds of data for your Facebook ad campaigns despite this upcoming ban. To introduce myself, my name is Jessica and I am Head of App Partnerships at Integromat. And today I'm joined by Emily Wilson, who is a Facebook Marketing Product Partnership Manager. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks so much for having me, Jessica. Looking forward to it.
Great, thank you, Emily. We also have one of our very own developers, Dominic Cadera, who will be actually showing a live demo of some of these solutions later on. Welcome, Dominic. Happy to have you as well.
Hey. Yeah.
Thank you, Dominic. Yes, so to return to the topic of today's webinar and to get started, really this issue of the impending restriction to third-party cookies and third-party data, it's an issue that's spanning the entire globe and really affecting all the big name advertising platforms. And what this is really causing for anyone advertising online is they're trying to find new ways to work around the lack of third-party data that won't be available at some point soon. How can advertisers still create relevant ads? How can they still target relevant audiences with those ads? How can publishers still have a return on investment on ads? And how can users still see ads that are relevant to them? There needs to be some new workarounds and new forms of data that needs to be available. And so today we're talking about a new form of data, which is on-site or server data, and how that can be accessed to advertise online in still the ways that we want to and target the audiences that we need to. We're putting a specific lens on this with Facebook and advertising within Facebook itself. And we're lucky enough to have Facebook online with us today to talk about how they're mitigating some of the issues that are coming from the third-party cookie restrictions with their product, the Conversions API. So how does Integromat fit into this? Well, as an iPaaS solution or an integration platform, we are actually a Facebook marketing partner and have a number of Facebook apps already on our platform that users can use to integrate their entire marketing strategy with. And we've actually created a solution for the Conversions API that helps to make this transition to using server data or on-site data seamlessly and automatic, which we'll get into. So to jump right into the agenda for today, we'll be speaking first off, of course, of what is really going on in the online ads ecosystem across the board, as well as then looking into a deep dive into Facebook itself and an intro to Conversions API with Emily. Then we'll be discussing a little bit more about Integromat itself. What is Integromat, if you're new to it, and how we have created a solution for the Conversions API and how users can start leveraging the Conversions API easily and quickly despite this change. Lastly, we'll show you exactly how it works with a demo with Dominic from our team here. And then we'll be following up with a Q&A where we will begin to answer your questions that you may have throughout the program. And with that, we can get started and I will turn it over to Emily.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. So, hey folks, I'm Emily from Facebook. And I work on our partnerships team. So I think about how do we engage third-party partners like Integromat to help us solve some of the most complex challenges that advertisers and businesses on our platform are facing. And one of those challenges, as Jessica mentioned, is how businesses can build for personalization and privacy within a constantly evolving ads ecosystem. So it's important to note that expectations are changing in the world around advertising. More and more people really want to understand how their data is being used by businesses. And to support this, new regulations have been enacted by governments like GDPR across Europe and the California Consumer Protection Act in California. Both of these regulatory guidelines were really created to make data protection more consistent in terms of how businesses or companies are collecting data, storing it, using it, and deleting it. And on top of that, as Jessica mentioned, there's also been changes across ad platforms, devices, and browsers. So those include concepts like tracking prevention, which have been implemented by browsers like Safari, as Jessica noted, and Firefox to limit the use of third-party cookies, as well as ad blocking becoming a standard setting on some browsers, and a bunch of new tools across ad platforms, including within Facebook, our off Facebook activity feature. And just collectively, all these changes are happening as the ecosystem is evolving to address the needs and demands of consumers for more control over their data. Given that these changes are underway, it's really important that businesses start planning for these changes today, because they'll disrupt basically all businesses that rely on ad revenue. So to give you an illustrative example, a study in Germany among publishers found that anti-tracking changes enabled by Firefox resulted in a 40% drop in average bid rate and a 15% drop in average revenue rate, which is massive. And as these protocols and anti-tracking features become default settings across both technologies and devices, we suspect that most of our businesses and advertisers on our platforms, including some of you guys who may be tuned in, are likely to see impact that may be similar to these publishers. So let's walk through the current flow of data that you might see today to try to understand how this impact will really be materialized and be felt. So first, a consumer would open a browser and visit a website. After they take action on the website, like adding an item to their cart or buying something, a pixel event is triggered, which sends the information simultaneously to the server for that brand's website, as well as back to the browser. When anti-tracking defaults are enabled, the browser may no longer be able to share that necessary information to ad platforms, and as a result, retargeting could become more difficult. And what does that actually mean? It means that there will be significant impact to advertisers' ability to reach, engage, and convert their customers. Without data from the browser and information around what actions people are taking on your website, a business and an advertiser should expect to see impact throughout the funnel. So at the top, it gets harder to reach as many people who might be interested in your product or services. And at the bottom, losing visibility could impact how well you can optimize your ads to drive the business outcome you actually want, which is acquisition and conversion. And lastly, measuring what's happening gets a lot more difficult because you don't have visibility into what's occurring on your website. And that can adversely impact your entire ad strategy because you don't know where to put your dollars, you don't know what's working and what's not working. So that's the challenge. The good news is that there's so much that we can do together, Facebook and our partners and our mutual customers, to meet these challenges and continue to provide relevant information and advertising to consumers. Just again, to reiterate sort of the importance of this, if you hop to the next slide, if you don't become more browser independent and these changes happen that have already begun, sort of the switch flips and more of them happen all at once, we compared the acquisition cost of a campaign that uses conversions and one that uses link clicks. Facebook advertisers who don't prepare for these changes are going to see higher acquisition costs because the pixel allows you to capture the conversion event. And when you don't have that capability, you might optimize a campaign. You might have to optimize your campaign for link clicks, which really only considers whether people clicked on an ad, not if they ultimately bought an item, which is really the thing that you as a business care about. You don't care that someone clicked on an ad, you care whether or not they came through to your website and made a purchase or submitted a lead or subscribed or whatever sort of that end business outcome is. through this study that we did, we found that when conversion data can no longer be passed through a browser and an advertiser has to switch from optimizing for that end business result to just the click, the cost per acquisition on a campaign increases by more than 150%. So the impact is like very real and very meaningful. If you don't have that data, you're going to have to optimize for a link click, and your costs are likely to increase because you just won't have the insight and visibility into what's happening on your website with the business outcome you really care about. So at Facebook, the way that we approach every action we take, it really starts with our mission to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together, which is our mission and one that we take very seriously in everything that we do. And as a company that brings billions of people and businesses together every day, we really understand and we've seen the importance of building for people first, because we know that when we safeguard a really excuse me, healthy and vibrant community for people, that leads to a healthy and vibrant community for businesses. And this is true for every product, from Facebook groups to Marketplace and from Instagram stories to WhatsApp for business. And so as part of that principle, we're really focused on building trust with people, in part by working to honor their privacy across all of our apps and services. So as all these industry changes are happening, in parallel, we at Facebook have been investing in products that help empower people with education and control over how their data gets used, and we'll continue to improve these products and education moving forward. So this slide just shows some of those efforts that we have undertaken over the last decade, whether it's rolling out new privacy controls, the launch of Privacy Checkup, which allows users to see how their data is being used. We've made it easier to find those controls so that users feel like they have a lot of agency over what their data is being used for. We've rolled out an ad preferences tool in 2018. We rolled out a bunch of features to comply with GDPR. And then I almost said last year, in 2019, we rolled out 2 features. Why am I seeing this post? As well as off Facebook activity, which I mentioned before, allows a user to determine how their data is used outside of Facebook. In 2020, we supported the California Consumer Protection Act, as well as privacy checkup updates. And we expect and you can anticipate that this will continue to be a really important effort for us moving forward into this year and beyond. We'll continue to make sure that we are giving people tools to have more control and transparency over the data that they're using, while continuing to preserve the value that businesses get out of our advertising on our platform. So one of the specific products that Jessica mentioned earlier that is helping us maintain user privacy and control over their data while continuing to support businesses is the Conversions API. Conversions API helps a business get ahead of some of the changes that are already underway or upcoming browser or regulatory changes by allowing you to share data from consumers for whom you've received explicit consent and permission directly from your server rather than through the browser. Conversions API helps you measure and optimize your ad campaigns for the outcomes you want using data that you control. And what we recommend is adopting Conversions API today. It's a proactive step that can help you safeguard your advertising from the performance degradations that we expect and that we talked about earlier, while preserving your consumers' privacy choices. So before Conversions API is implemented, we saw this earlier, data flows through to Facebook as follows. An event where customer data is entered into a field on a website, or a person clicks on a hyperlink to visit a web page. This triggers a request to the client's website or server from the browser to submit information. And as the form is submitted, the landing page loads, whatever, the pixel event is triggered, and the Facebook pixel, which has been installed on the client's web page, loads on the browser, which shares the event data with Facebook. And that works really well. However, we know that as the pixel, as these browser changes are underway and these regulatory things continue to roll out, the efficacy of the pixel is going to decrease. And as we discussed, that's a huge risk for advertisers on Facebook who no longer will have access to data that they need to inform their ad campaigns. However, if you use Conversions API, after it's implemented, you now have a direct channel for events that's established between the client server and Facebook. As I mentioned, the API is designed to honor all of Facebook's user privacy controls. So if a customer has used off Facebook activity tool to limit how their off Facebook activity data is used, those choices are extended to data sent via Conversions API. So again, in this way, we allow you as a business to continue providing your customers with relevant experiences that they love, while supporting your efforts to provide them with appropriate data transparency and control. So just again, to really drive this home, without the data that's captured by cookies via the browser, we expect advertisers will experience pretty significant impact in their ability to reach people who have expressed an interest in their brand, deliver ads that feel relevant and useful to their customers, optimize those ads toward conversions, and accurately measure and report on campaign results. And so as a result, we expect that businesses will need to review and in some cases update the transparency and control they provide to people over how their data is collected, stored, and shared. They'll need to think about new privacy technologies and focus on reducing reliance on cookies to ensure that revenue remains resilient over the long term. So what can you do right now? Leading businesses are taking steps now to build better experiences for people while respecting their privacy choices. And we think it's really important to invest in this work now because it'll make it easier for you as a business to address any future regulatory requirements like enhanced transparency or control requirements that come down, whether they're from browsers or governments. All of these things are steps that you can take now to build for personalization and privacy as the ecosystem evolves. So number one, make it easier for consumers to understand how their data is shared and used by their business. Make sure you understand how data is used, acquired, and stored within your own website, and make sure you have all the consent necessary to use or share it. As we discussed, implementing products like Conversions API to establish channels that allow you to become browser independent. And explore data collection through valuable experiences like loyalty programs, discounts, VIP programs, etc. And just broadly, I think the other great news is that we have a whole ecosystem of partners like Integromat that are really well positioned to help advertisers tackle this. I think there can be some feeling that this is very overwhelming. There's a lot of concern about being in compliance with regulatory requirements and all that stuff. And that's totally reasonable. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of things that businesses need to do to make sure they're prepared for this future. But the great news is that we have partners like Integromat who are in the best possible position to help our advertisers prepare for that future. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jessica to talk about Integromat's solution.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing the insights of really what's happening within Facebook and even over the years of how you've been helping to make this transition and being very aware of the changes with privacy and online advertising as a whole, as well as showing really what's going to change and affect for users when this ban really does take an effect, when the Conversions API becomes needed, how this will affect not only costs, but the relevancy of ads for users out there. And to segue now into Integromat and how we're helping with this solution is we are able to provide an easy way for users to get started using the Conversions API. So to give you a little insight into Integromat, if it's brand new to you, if you're joining us as a Facebook advertiser new to integration and Integromat, Integromat is a workflow integration platform that allows users to connect their different online products together to automatically transfer data or transform data from one app to another and really automate your tasks for you. And it's done without any coding. And so this is huge for Conversions API and the implementation of it. And let me show you how. To implement and start using the Conversions API, as Emily had pointed out what the Conversions API and the need for it, there's two ways. One of which is using a developer. And as we know, using a developer and manually coding it can take time. It takes time at the beginning to create the project, label out the scopes of everything that you need, then finding the developer or finding the developer time within your company. As we know, developer time can be scarce quite often. Then realizing the idea and building the code to create the connection from your online resources to the Conversions API, then testing the solution and running it. That can end up costing you several weeks and will undoubtedly need maintenance in the future with changes to APIs as they do change. The other option is using an integration platform, and this is where Integromat can really come in. It really takes out the first few steps of creating the project and the scopes and finding the developer, as you can build it all within our integration builder, which you'll see soon yourself and get started. Then realizing the idea, testing the solution, and running it only takes a few hours, potentially, and it's always up to date. The API documentation maintenance is completely maintained by Integromat on our end, and all that's needed from you is your Facebook Event Manager account and your Pixel ID to get started. So to go a little bit deeper into really what Integromat is, it's an integration platform that you can use to connect any number of apps together. We have, as I mentioned before, we have many different Facebook apps, the Conversions API being one of them, but we have over 650 ready-made apps that are there for you to connect to. So you can use the Integromat platform to connect your repository of your on-site or server data, or another app that you're using to collect this data, or even your website, thanks to our generic HTTP and JSON modules that allow you to connect any online service to another service right on our platform. So we have a ready-made solution for the Conversions API. So it's a ready-made app that you can use to, without any coding, connect your on-site data and server data to your Facebook Event Manager to optimize your Facebook ad campaigns. On top of that, you can have as many steps as you need in the integration. So if you want to build out a longer form workflow for your entire marketing schematic, you can do that within our platform. And as I mentioned, there's no coding required. And what this furthermore means is, with this ongoing change and impending restriction of third-party cookies, we are making this change accessible and easy to be made with Integromat. All Facebook advertisers have the access to using the Conversions API easily right away by not having to use a manual connection or relying on a developer to create the connection. The power is back into their hands to make that connection from their on-site data to Facebook using Integromat. So they can be part of this crucial shift towards using server data to inform their Facebook ad campaigns. They will have the ability and power themselves to connect their on-site data collected from their server to their Facebook Event Business Manager easily and automatically. But on top of that, as we already mentioned, this is a solution now. Even if third-party cookies are not completely banned yet, the time to switch is available now and can actually add added benefits to you now. And this is because of the dual combination of the Conversions API solution itself and the Integromat platform. So by integrating data using Integromat, Facebook advertisers will have more control over which events are tracked and sent. They will also have increased data security by restricting access to end user data. They will have increased flexibility in data sharing by pulling directly from the server, pulling the events that they exactly want to need, or pulling out just specific attributes of the events that they need by using that server data. As well as they will ensure data is not lost by not relying on pixel data or cookies alone. It is a safe bet, and it's something that will be there for them. So how to get started? To start using the Conversions API, with Integromat, you will require an Integromat account. So you can sign up for free, or we do have plans starting at $9, $29, $99, $299 a month, or we do have custom plans available depending upon your needs. So after signing up for an account, you will just need to connect your Facebook Business Event Manager and Pixel ID, and you can start connecting it to your other online apps that you use to send your on-site data directly to your Facebook Business Event Manager to inform your Facebook ad campaigns. But enough of me talking and explaining it. We want to show you really how easy it is to set up and how that looks like within our scenario builder, as you can see here. So with that, I will now turn it over to Dominic to show you the demo of the integration.
Perfect. Thanks, Jessica. Hello once again, everybody. I'm really happy that I can join you today, and let me show you how easy it is to actually connect any data source to Facebook Conversions API using Integromat. For our demonstration purposes, let's start with a simple Google Sheet. I have prepared my marketing events Google Sheet just here, and you can see that I have some order IDs, some emails, currencies, and values in it, and we'll connect it to the Facebook Conversions API. So let's start in Integromat with a blank scenario, and the first thing we want to do is to employ Google Sheets Watch New Rows module. When I add this module, I can choose which Google connection I'd like to use. Let's stick with the demo for now. Now I need to select the spreadsheet that I'm going to watch. So in our case, that's going to be marketing events. We are going to watch the one and only sheet there is available. And yeah, that's it. The first module is set up. Now we can try running this module. Let's watch all records in the module, in the sheet, and click Run Once button. Now, in the output of the module, you can see the first 2 rows from our Google Sheet returned to Integromat. If you check those order IDs, you can see that those are first 2 rows from our sheet. So connecting Integromat to Google Sheets is simple as that. The second module we need to use is the actual Facebook Conversions API. There's the one and only module available, which is called Send Events. And we are going to map our rows from the Google Sheets to this module. So I can now pick, again, the connection to the Facebook. I'll need Pixel ID, which I can obtain from the business Facebook Events Manager page. Now I'm going to use this one, Simple Sheet Shop. And we are going to copy and paste the Pixel ID to the module. The last thing we need to do is to map the actual data from the first module. So let's click Add Item, and let's fill this pop-up. So the event name is definitely a purchase, because we are going to watch some purchases. We'll map currency from the first module. We can just drag and drop values, or just click them, and they are automatically mapped to the corresponding fields. Let's map order ID now. As event time, we can use one of built-in variables in Integromat. So we are going for now. And as user data, let's stick only with email. So let's just map user email to the module. And yeah, we are done. This is how easy it is. Now, if I save the configuration of the module and run the scenario again, you can see that I have sent 2 rows from our Google Sheet to Facebook Conversions API. If I click through the outputs of the modules, in the first module, I can see that I have retrieved the 3rd and 4th row from our Google Sheets. And to the Conversions API, I have sent 2 events. In the operation 1, I have sent the first row, and in the operation 2, I have sent the another one. And this is how easy it is. If I now head back to the Facebook, in a while, I would be able to see the events here, but it takes a little while to actually process the data on Facebook servers. So now I'll just show you how does it look like when you have some events already captured by the Conversions API. So let's head to another pixel where we have some data already prepared. And you can see that I have performed some 10 purchases, some 10 purchases. And if I click details, I can see details of the events. If I open, no, if I click through it, I can definitely export the data, manage the mapping, and here I can view the parameters that I'm receiving from Integromat, like currency and order ID and value. All those parameters were mapped from the scenario, and I can click through and somehow process data in the Conversions API interface. So yeah, that's how easy it is to actually get events from any data source. Instead of Google Sheets, I could use any other connector that Integromat offers. You can see that we have quite broad palette of all the modules we offer. And from each this data source, I would be able to easily send events to Conversions API using this single send and events module. So I would say this is it, and maybe we can head back to Jess and continue.
Great. Thank you so much, Dominic, for sharing the demo and how users can easily get started building integrations within Integromat. We do have a few questions that are already coming in regarding the demo itself, and of course, wanting to learn what else we can connect with it. So one of the first questions we have is the Google Sheet is representing the server database in this example. Yes, it definitely is. We wanted to show a quick and easy demo about just connecting one app to another. And essentially, yeah. So it's as if you've collected the server data and you just want to house it in a database. Google Sheets is, funnily enough, our most used app, or one of the most used apps, and it's used almost as a database. So it is plausible that this happens as well. And as Dominic mentioned, there's a number of other apps that you can connect to. Correct, Dominic? Do you have any other suggestions of other apps we can connect to?
As I can see now on the screen, another question is, does it have a connection with WooCommerce and Shopify? Yes, of course, we have both services integrated. So if I now search for WooCommerce, you can see that we have some modules available. Maybe could I get my screen to the broadcast? Perfect, thanks. So if I search for WooCommerce, I can actually get WooCommerce module and watch new orders, new customers. And for each of those triggers, I could employ the Facebook Conversions API module again and get information about all those events to the Conversions API. And the same states for Shopify. If I search for Shopify, you can see that we have Shopify integrated as well. And again, we can watch new orders and then trigger events and push them to the Conversions API. So yeah, both of those services are already integrated on Integromat.
Great. And there was also a question regarding connecting an SQL database with Integromat directly, or would they need to export it to a Google Sheet or a CSV file?
Well, we have connectors for using SQL databases directly as well. For example, if I'd like to use Postgres SQL, I can directly perform a query. So definitely, yeah, it's possible to connect to SQL database directly from Integromat. Another database we have is surely MS SQL, I think. Microsoft SQL Server, here it is. So yeah, it's possible to connect directly to SQL databases as well using Integromat.
Great, thank you again for that one and providing a little bit more of more examples that we can do. We have another question, and this one's for Emily. How is this different from GTM and Facebook pixel data?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think at a macro level, the way that I would think about Conversion API is really as a means of transmitting the same data that comes through the Facebook pixel, or if you're using a tag manager like Google Tag Manager. So the the example that we always use internally is if you put a letter in the mail, you don't care if that letter is transported via plane, via train, via bus, via boat, as long as the letter gets from you to the person that you're trying to send it to. And that's the way that we think about these different sort of means of passing data to Facebook. So the Facebook Pixel is one way that you can send us data, but as we discussed, there's a lot of changes happening in the industry that could reduce the efficacy of the Facebook Pixel. And so our recommendation is to start sending data through Conversion API as well. So if Facebook Pixel is a train, Conversions API is a plane. It's the same set of data. It just gets to Facebook in a slightly different way. And we think businesses should start integrating with Conversion API and sending us data this way now, so that when these browser changes come down or regulatory changes that make the Pixel less effective, they'll be in a great place where their ad campaigns and their business will not be disrupted because they've already established this alternative channel of sending us that crucial information that they need to make their ads more effective.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that one as well. And maybe this is for Emily or Dominic. How does the purchase attribute back to a Facebook ad?
Yeah, so again, like it's the same exact set of data that you're sending to us. And we use a couple of there's a number of different match keys that you can pass us in Conversions API that allow us to identify that what happened on the website, the event that you're sending us via server is matching to a user on Facebook. So that includes things like all the basics, name, address, user ID, as well as things like IP address. And that allows us to map the event that's coming through the server to the person on Facebook. Dominic, I don't know if there's anything you want to add from an Integromat perspective.
I think you said everything. So yeah, okay for me.
Okay. Yeah.
We also have another question. What is happening with click data? Do we need Facebook with do we feed Facebook with behavioral click data on the site?
So I think to clarify that question, it sounds like a question about what's happening when users click off of Facebook. If you have the Facebook Pixel placed on your website, then yes, that data is used to inform the advertising that you're buying, as well as other activity on Facebook. So it's important to note that we don't permit conquesting or anything like that on our platform. So any data about what's happening on your website, if we're using that in another use case, it's been aggregated to a level that makes sure that it's not being used by a competitor or anything like that. But yeah, click data will still be used. I think what we are focused on is making sure that click data isn't the only thing we have to use, that we have this further downstream activity, which is really important around what's actually happening once a user clicks off of Facebook on site. If you're relying solely on the pixel, that data is likely to go away at some point in the medium-term future. And so that's why we think transitioning to Conversion API and integrating with that API is really important now.
Thank you again. Again, this is another, I think, really important one, as we talked about earlier, is one of the added benefits with using Integromat. It's not just relying on pixel data or cookie data. What if we send the same data via API and pixel? Can this mess up our Facebook campaigns?
Yeah, so the good news is that we have a mechanism in place to ensure that doesn't happen. So there's a parameter called event ID that you send in the pixel and in Conversion API. So if you are using a duplicate setup, which is actually what we recommend, and just to put a point on that, as long as the pixel functions, we still recommend that businesses keep the pixel on their website and continue to use data that comes through the pixel. We recommend that they set up Conversions API in parallel so that they're sending data from both places, and they deduplicate that data with the event ID, which Dominic is showing here. Do you want to talk through that?
I was just going to show what you are talking about and show that in our module, there is event ID field available, so users can use this for deduplication.
Yep. So basically, we check and make sure if we see that the same event ID is coming from an event that's sent via the Pixel and Conversions API, we deduplicate that event. So provided you've set up your integration properly, there shouldn't be any issue with your campaigns. In some cases, another thing that we didn't mention that's a value for the Conversion API is you can send data that you couldn't send through the Pixel. So if you are a business that you optimize for leads and you drive people to your website and you want them to sign up for a lead, but ultimately the thing you care about is the actual call that happens, and some kind of sale or interaction happens over the call, you can't pass that data through the Pixel because it doesn't happen on your website. It happens offline. And so you can send that additional data via Conversion API if you have access to it. And so that can actually help improve performance of your campaigns because you may be able to now optimize for an event that happens outside of the browser that you couldn't optimize for before. So I think short answer is it shouldn't mess up your campaigns provided you implement event ID correctly, which is really easy to do with a partner like Integromat. And if you are able to send additional data that you weren't able to through the browser, it may actually help improve the performance of your campaigns.
Great answer, Emily. And I think it brings out a really important point of why the Conversions API, it's not just a change that we have to do, but it is actually a positive change that's going towards more flexibility and more sharing in what advertisers are able to do online. We have another question, I believe, for you. Sorry, you're being heavy-hitted today. Everyone's excited about it. Will remarketing still be available?
Yeah, so broadly, yes, but we expect that the efficacy or sort of available audience sizes may decrease as the Pixel and third-party cookies become less effective. So while we'll still be able to understand like who clicked off-site and create remarketing audiences off of that, things like website custom audiences may be impacted as more people, as browsers make these changes and more people opt out of having tracking. But broadly, yes, remarketing will still be available.
Great, thank you. And will these changes affect lead gen forms? We also have another question specifically about that product.
Yeah, so if you're using the Facebook lead product and the whole experience is happening within Facebook, you're not actually going off-site. And so as long as the experience is contained within Facebook, browser changes won't impact because you don't actually go to a browser. The whole lead gen form fill out is happening within Facebook. However, if you are running ads that are driving to your website where you're having a user fill out or a customer fill out a lead gen form on your site, those will be impacted because, again, you're relying on the Pixel firing on your website to communicate information back to a platform like Facebook about what's happening on your site.
Great, thank you. Dominic, this one I believe is for you. If you can just show a little bit, go into detail a little bit more with the demo. Where they're wondering exactly where you got the event ID from.
Well, that really depends on the service you are integrating, but let's get a concrete example. So if we were using our Google Sheet, we could definitely use order ID as an event ID as well, because if I open the mapping of the Conversions API module once again, I can really type here anything I need. So I could use as event ID, for example, order dash and then map here the value from the preceding module. And if I would use the same generated identifier in the Conversions API integration, as well as on my website where I'm using another JavaScript to actually track the events, then it would get perfectly fit in Facebook and it would duplicate as Emily has described. So that really depends on your integration and what you choose to use as an event ID. You can compose it as you want, basically.
Great, thanks, Dominic, for showing that a little bit more in detail and again showing the complexity and options that are really available by using the Conversions API on Integromat to implement this new product from Facebook. We have another question. Again, I believe this one's for Emily. What about GDPR? What should people get noticed about if we use Conversions API? What sensitive data are coming to Facebook if this is cookieless?
Yeah, so I would say broadly, when advertisers use any of Facebook's business tools, which include Conversions API and the Pixel, for collecting and sharing data, they may have regulatory obligations. So our legal terms provide that companies implementing these business tools must comply with any applicable laws when using these tools. So that could include things like providing notice and obtaining prior informed consent for the storing and access of PII information. So generally, we recommend that advertisers make their own determinations about how to comply with government regulations or laws. But just generally, all of our Facebook business terms are governed by the same legal terms. So if you're using the Pixel and you decide to implement Conversion API, they're covered by the same legal terms. So there's nothing additional on our side. But if an advertiser is unsure about whether they need to gather additional consent from their users, they should work with their own legal representation to ensure that their use of our business tools is compliant with any relevant laws and regulations. Generally, it's difficult. We can't provide legal advice on how advertisers use our products with regard to their own legal or regulatory obligations. So we recommend that you look into that with your own teams, but just generally all of our business terms are governed by the same legal terms.
Great, thanks for speaking specifically to GDPR and regulatory issues like that. I have another question directly for Emily again. And I think a lot of people want your advice as you're here today with us about best practices, which is great. Would you suggest creating specific and targeted audiences for retargeting, going back to the retargeting question, such as for iOS 14 audiences or for Firefox audiences?
Yeah, I think I would say iOS 14 I would say this is a slightly different topic than core Conversion API functionality, which is really, again, just a means of passing the same data that you have permission and consent to share just via a different channel. If we're talking about sort of like tactics, best practices for dealing with some of the browser changes as well as changes as part of iOS 14, we don't have a ton of specific recommendations at this point in time because particularly with iOS, the enforcement of the prompt, which will have a lot of impact on how businesses use our platform, that hasn't been enforced yet. So we don't have a ton to share at this point. I would say we recommend just generally that businesses test a ton. Anytime there's a new feature or a change or a regulation, we really rely on our community of like active advertisers and developers to help us determine what is the best way to go about optimizing, targeting, et cetera, in the new world. So at this point, we don't have any firm recommendations, no.
Does the Conversions API solve and help with the opt-out of tracking in iOS 14?
So I would say short answer is no. I would not think about Conversion API as a way to bypass any regulatory privacy controls. Like that's absolutely not what we want folks to take away. We want folks to take away that Conversions API is another way to pass data that helps you become browser independent, but it's not meant to circumvent privacy choices or controls that users have put into place. Regardless of how data is shared, whether it's through Conversion API, the Pixel, through our offline Conversion API, our business tools terms, as I mentioned, mandate that advertisers only share data in line with their own legal obligations, platform terms, and the commitments that they make to users.
Sure, great. It is a great point that this is, again, an addition to the products that we're already using, and it's not in replace of. I think it would be great to show a little bit also more of what really Integromat can do in terms of using the Conversions API and in a full marketing solution. Dominic, I would love your assistance to show perhaps how we can build upon the two-step module or two-step scenario that you built, and to really provide more opportunities using the Conversions API in a full marketing workflow.
Sure. Let's build some integration which will contain more than only 2 modules. So let's quickly just build again the first that we have started with. So let's go for Google Sheets. Let's map again our Google Sheet from the Integromat demo, and we'll use again marketing events and the sheet number 1. Yeah, we are done here, and we are going to watch it all. And let's connect quickly send events again. I'm not sure if I have still in the clipboard the correct ID, so let's copy it once again for sure. And yeah, we are going still to watch purchases. And yeah, maybe this can be a little more complex example. I'm thinking of what we can actually do. In the chat, I can see a question about duplicates conversion. So maybe I could show you how to use one of Integromat's inbuilt feature, which is called data stores, to make sure that you don't send the same event ID twice from Integromat. So let's finish the mapping here, and then we'll jump to the data stores. So value here, order ID here, event time. Let's go for now again. User data, we are going to use email, and let's pick some event ID like order dash and ID of the actual order. Perfect. So if I now run the scenario, we are going to run it from beginning. So we are going to send first 2 rows. Once I click run once button, you can see that we have retrieved the first and the second row. Now, if I reset the module, so I right click it and I choose where to start, and I again want to watch all rows in the Google Sheet and rerun the scenario now, you can see that I have sent again first 2 rows. So effectively, I have now sent duplicate records to Conversions API. If I'd like to set up some more complex scenario on Integromat side to prevent this, I can definitely use a feature called data store. So let's make some space, and we are going to put a new module here, which is called data stores. Perfect. The idea of this scenario is that we are going to search our data store for a record. And if the record will exist, we are not going to send the event to Conversions API. If the record does not exist, we will send the event and put in the data store the information about the event that we have just sent, so we don't send it again. So let's start with building a simple data store. In Integromat, the data stores are something like internal database, which you can use to store some data that you don't want to store again in some external SQL database or Google Sheet or whatever. So let's create a simple data store with a data structure which will contain, yeah, we can keep my data structure here, which will contain the order ID. So let's create order ID, which we can keep as a text and is required. So now we have built a specification for the data store, and you can think of data store as a table in your SQL database. So if I now create the data structure and pick a size for the data store, let's go, for example, with 3 megabytes. I can now see the data store in my in the data stores list, which is available in the left menu. Now we will be able to see a simple data store here. And if I now browse the data store, it's empty because I haven't processed any orders yet. So we are going to search for records in the data store. So actually, my bad, we are not going for get a record, but for search in data store. So we are going to search records, and we are going to search in simple data store where the order ID equals to order ID from our Google Sheet. And we are going to continue the execution of the route even in the module returns no results. So actually, this is what we want. The module will pass through even when there's no record in the data store for the corresponding order ID. And then we are going to employ another feature of Integromat, which is called filter. On those links between modules, you can set up filters. So we can now filter only new orders, and we are going for existence of the actual key in our data store. Because if nothing is returned from the data store, it means the order does not exist and the key does not exist. So we are going to pass only rows for which the key does not exist in the data store. And the last module we need to use is to actually take a note to our data store that we have processed the order. So the last module after this Facebook Conversions API module would be add or replace a record. Again, we are going for our simple data store, and we are going to put the order ID here in our data store. We don't want to overwrite existing records now. So yeah, now the scenario is ready to be run. So let's again reset our module. Let's start watching all rows in the Google Sheet, which represents database or any other data source that you can imagine. And if I now run the scenario, you can see that I have processed 2 rows. I have sent 2 events to Facebook Conversions API. And now I have added 2 rows to our data store. And if I reset the module once again, it will again process first 2 rows, but now it will find them in the data store. So the filter won't let those rows proceed further to the scenario. If I run the scenario again, I'm going to process those 2 rows in our Google Sheet, and it will pass correctly. And now if I run it again, there are no more rows in our sheet. So we are going to receive no results. If I would add another row, for example, let's go for 444, another email at gmail.com. We're going to buy something for, I don't know, $20 again. And if I now rerun the scenario, I'm going to receive the 1 row from the sheet, and it has been correctly put to our data store as well. If I now open the data store browser, I can see that for each order I have processed, there is a row in the data store. So now I am deduplicating the events, and I'm preventing the same event ID or the same order ID to be sent twice to Conversions API using the data store feature. So yeah, this is it basically.
It's just like that. It takes only a few minutes and quick thought to get through. So thank you, Dominic, for exploring and expanding really what you can do with Facebook Conversions API on Integromat. Thanks to some of our inbuilt features that really allow you to go even above and beyond and show what you can do with duplicate conversions. But with that, it looks like we're running out of time here. However, we are going to try to get most of your answers, if not all of the answers, all of your questions answered. So we will follow up with an email with those answers. We'll coordinate with Emily some of those responses so we can get them to you. But with that, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this webinar. And I want to give a special thank you to our guests today. So thank you, Emily, for taking the time and sharing with us what's happening in Facebook, what's happening within the online ad ecosystem in general, and Facebook specifically, and the Conversions API. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Dominic, for sharing exactly how the integration works within Integromat itself and how users can get started. So to get started using the Conversions API on Integromat, you can go to integromat.com, or we do have a specific landing page for the Conversions API, which we will follow up in the email, so you can get started using it today. All right, thank you, everyone, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you on a webinar sometime soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.